There's breaking news just coming in at this point of time in a plane that has crashed in Ahmedabad near the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Airport.
New details on the Air India crash and new questions about possible sabotage.
What if a jetliner's engines obeyed code more than the crew? What if sabotage didn't need explosives, just a few silent lines of firmware? Could anyone hide a digital booby-trap inside a routine software update? And, most unsettling, how would you ever know before the wheels left the runway? All these questions hit deep into the mind of any intellectual. When, on June 12, 2025, Air India Flight 171 lifted off under perfect skies and crashed less than a minute later.
Now, the preliminary probe into the crash of Air India Flight 171 has left more questions than it provided answers.
This is the story of how software, not weather or metal, brought down a modern Dreamliner. First flash of disaster. On June 12, 2025, afternoon skies over Ahmedabad were so calm that veteran spotters near Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International felt no need to keep their cameras ready. Then, a sharp metallic thud echoed across Meghanhinagar, followed by a bloom of orange fire. In those first seconds, nobody knew the name of the flight, only that a commercial airliner had fallen so quickly that even radar techs stared at their screens in disbelief. Minutes later, social feeds filled with shaky clips, a low-flying Boeing 787 cruising far below a safe climb, landing gear still dangling, engines humming strangely soft. The aircraft, registration VT-AB, operating as Air India 171 to London Gatwick, hit the corner of a college hostel at 1339 local. The blast consumed entire dorm rooms, sent concrete dust 3 stories high, and scattered glowing fragments across narrow lanes. People rushed toward the roar, expecting survivors to crawl free. Instead, they found molten seats and twisted laminate. Within an hour, the death toll reached 241 of the 242 souls aboard.
The preliminary report into the Air India plane crash, which killed 260 people, has found the fuel control switches of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner,
plus dozens injured on the ground. The nation stood stunned. No storm, no mid-air explosion, no warning in air traffic chatter, just a routine takeoff turned fireball in under a minute. The lone survivor. Miracle amid ruin. Firefighters combing debris discovered a man wedged between a collapsed wall and a mound of soft earth. He had occupied seat 11A in economy. During impact, the fuselage split and ejected a pocket of luggage insulation that wrapped around his torso like bubble wrap. He suffered broken ribs, a concussion, and deep burns, yet he was conscious by the time medics hoisted him clear. In the trauma ward, he repeated the same fragments: hard jolt, odd whir, spinning cabin, blackout. Psychologists recorded his recollection of a low humming vibration right after rotation, the kind heard when electrical buses trip off one by one. As the only living witness inside the cabin, his half-formed memories became priceless to investigators. They confirmed 2 crucial clues. First, passengers felt a sudden loss of thrust, not a sharp explosion. Second, cabin lights flickered exactly when the aircraft should have been climbing most steeply. Doctors warned reporters not to badger him. Recovered victims sometimes create false images under morphine haze, but his timeline matched the flight data recorder almost frame for frame. Officials quietly admitted that without his testimony, the public might still believe an engine tore itself apart. His survival offered hope.
One man walking away from that scene, and that survivor,
but also underscored how every other voice, including 2 seasoned pilots, had been silenced forever. Routine that should have been. Hours earlier, the departure looked textbook. Captain Sumit Sabharwal, boasting 10,000+ hours on wide-body jets, completed a brisk walk-around of the sleek Dreamliner. His first officer, equally rated, ran internal tests. All green lights. The Trent 1000 engines had impeccable paperwork. The starboard unit overhauled in March, the port inspected in April. Weather was VMC. Visibility 10 kilometers, Winds light from the west, no convection over the city. At 13:38, the tower cleared Flight 171 for runway 23, departure toward London, a 9-hour hop that the crew had flown many times. Boarding agents sealed the doors on 230 passengers and 12 crew. Total fuel, well within range margins, was balanced and checked. The Boeing 787's health monitoring system pinged no alerts during taxi. Even the cabin announcement felt routine. Seatbelt signs lit, flight attendants demoed life jackets nobody expected to use. Runway acceleration was smooth, VR called precisely, nose wheel leaving tarmac right on schedule. Yet, hidden in the aircraft's digital veins, an invisible countdown had already begun. No system designer intended it. No human on board could see it. At rotation, gauges showed thrust levers forward, but engine pressure ratios strangely stubborn. By the time the Dreamliner's wheels retracted halfway, thrust had slipped below the climb minimum, and the fate of everyone on board was sealed. Abrupt failure in the climb. Eyewitnesses would later swear that Flight 171 floated instead of climbing. Data confirmed the jet never cleared 700 feet AGL. Around 18 seconds after liftoff, something unheard of happened. The ram air turbine, RAT, burst into the airstream. This tiny propeller generator only deploys if both primary electrical sources die, a scenario flight manuals call extremely improbable. With its emergence, cockpit panels would have dimmed, hydraulic backups kicked to life.
The aircraft's fuel control switches abruptly moved to the cutoff position, starving the engines of fuel and triggering total power loss.
And flight control laws downgraded to a survivable but fragile mode. Strangely, neither engine flamed out. Sensors showed spools turning, fuel kept flowing, but at barely 40% of takeoff demand. It was like someone had clamped the throttles at half power while masking warning flags. Ground observers heard a soft whine rather than the roaring crescendo typical of a heavy Dreamliner. Pilots inside had mere seconds to diagnose. Engine fire, fuel contamination, thumb wheel trim runaway. They advanced levers, toggled switches, nothing bit. Worse, electronic screens prioritized RAT activation alerts, pushing thrust-limiting faults into submenus. Climb became glide, glide nosed into descent. The crew declared Mayday, thrust not achieved, falling. Tower instructed immediate left turnout for an emergency return, but lift was already bleeding away. With flaps still in takeoff position and gear only half retracted, drag erased the last knots. The jet dipped, left wing clipping hostile walls before the full airframe cartwheeled into fire. Mayday in 20 words. Cockpit voice recorders often capture chaotic stretches of alarms and shouted checklists.
The cockpit voice recording captured one pilot asking the other why he did then cut off.
Flight 171's CVR yielded mostly static. Technicians salvaged 30 garbled seconds, enough to transcribe 3 curt exchanges. Engines not responding, confirm settings. A softer reply. All set, nothing's changing. Then, after audible rattling, it's not us, locked out. That last phrase ignited dozens of theories. Locked out of engine controls, locked out by autopilot overprotection, or worse, locked out by an external or pre-planted digital command? Because the Boeing 787 routes almost every actuator through computers, a rogue signal could, in principle, override manual lever commands. Investigators tried to recreate the call in simulators. Pilots found the wording odd. Seasoned crews rarely say locked out unless referencing software privileges. The snippet's brevity also implied severe time pressure. Under RAT power, spare electrons are rationed. Some displays go dark, radios weaken. The captain's voice lacked panic but carried a clipped urgency. He knew lift was bleeding, but troubleshooting pages were buried behind increasingly blank screens. Remarkably, even with partial power, the transmitter carried those 20 words to the tower. Then audio cut to pure wind roar. the instant structural breakup of the tail. Analysts later spliced those words over the final flight data frame. Altitude 620 feet, airspeed decaying toward stall. It is now considered one of the shortest, starkest maydays in modern aviation history.
A flight school claims the airport unfairly let the aviation company that leases them space evict them on airport property.
Seal off and first clues. Emergency crews ring-fenced the crash site inside an hour. Media helicopters circled. Drones were banned to protect evidence. Investigators from India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AIB, arrived before sunset, joined by Boeing and FAA liaisons. They set triage priorities, locate black boxes, map debris field, recover human remains respectfully, and document perishable data like fluid stains or switch positions. With daylight fading, engineers stumbled on the bright red FDR stuck under a tail bulkhead, dented but intact. The CVR, torn from its mounts, turned up the next dawn embedded in charred soil. Meanwhile, forensic teams interviewed hostel residents struck by fragments. One student filmed the rat spinning, footage later used to confirm exact timing of power loss. Maintenance logs pulled from airport servers showed no engine trend warnings in the days prior. Fuel samples from the uplift truck came back uncontaminated. Most puzzling, no soot trails on recovered fan blades, no hot section shrapnel, symptoms expected in real engine failure. Simulators at Boeing's Seattle plant soon proved that reducing fuel metering valve commands by 60% could reproduce the identical shallow climb, RAT deployment, and aerodynamic stall. In other words, something had throttled the engines digitally, not mechanically. That was clue number 1. Clue 2 arrived when cyber specialists noticed an unfamiliar subroutine buried in the engine control unit's event log, time-stamped exactly 19 seconds after liftoff. Digital breadcrumbs. Modern jets are flying mainframes. The Dreamliner in particular stores gigabytes of data on each leg. Temperatures, voltages, control surface angles, even seatbelt latch counts. When analysts cracked open Flight 171's raw packets, they found a maintenance subroutine labeled for ground testing only. In ordinary servicing, technicians can run this routine to hold engine RPM at reduced power while checking vibration sensors. It is unreachable from cockpit panels, and software locks block activation in flight. Yet logs proved it ran anyway, and not tentatively. It executed a full throttle limit profile, then switched off 3 generator buses, a cascade that forced rat deployment. Its footprint matched a signed firmware block uploaded 2 months earlier during routine service. The code's checksum should have matched the master copy stored on Boeing's secure servers, but investigators noticed a subtle hash difference. One flag bit in a header. Automated scanners rated it benign. Human eyes missed it. Now, forensics concluded the tweak served as a delayed fuse. Once the aircraft met certain conditions, gear up command present, radar altimeter below 1,000 feet, the routine would launch.
The radio altimeter, also known as radar altimeter and abbreviated as RA.
That fuse explains why the event never triggered during taxi tests or engine run-ups. Only after liftoff, during climb power, did the booby-trap spring. Whoever inserted it understood Dreamliner data flows intimately, suggesting either an insider or an exceptionally sophisticated outsider. Voices in static. Recovering intelligible speech from a crushed, heat-damaged CVR is equal parts art and luck. Engineers at a UK lab cooled the memory board with liquid nitrogen, then used laser interferometry to map microscopic pits where audio bits once lived. Out of 120 seconds, they resurrected barely 40. Yet those scraps painted a vivid scene. Master caution alerts chiming, rat spindle whoosh, electronic fans spooling down. At plus 22 seconds, the first officer mutters a checklist item. Alec Emmer config confirm. That confirms the crew had already switched to emergency electrical mode. 10 seconds later, the captain attempts manual throttle. A click, a grunt, a second click. No corresponding rise on engine gauges. The phrase "locked out" follows immediately, implying some digital interlock stifled their commands. Investigators cross-referenced the timestamp with FDR frames, exactly when the captain called "locked out," the rogue routine's throttle limit command reached peak authority. Ironically, the rat kept enough juice flowing for radios, which allowed the mayday. Without the rat, the record would be mute. Analysts spliced the mayday with ATC tapes to synchronize the moment engines fell silent externally. The fit was perfect. Those faint words, now archived, became touchstones for a wider warning. Pilots may one day fight software, not storms or turbines, and lose. Dreamliner's double-edged sword. Boeing sold the 787 as a leap forward. Lighter composite skins, electro-tint windows, and high-efficiency electrical architecture that slashed hydraulic plumbing. In routine service, the jet excelled. Lower fuel burn, fewer leaks, shorter check intervals. Yet the very features that made it smart also widened its attack surface. Instead of 3 isolated hydraulic circuits, the 787 relies on power electronics to move many control surfaces. Redundancy exists, but redundancy works only when each channel answers to the same honest master. A malicious routine buried in all channels could turn redundancy into synchronized sabotage. Critics long warned that heavy code signing and encryption were essential. Flight 171 proved those critics right. Electric brakes, electric spoilers, even fuel pumps feed off common data buses. A single poisoned packet can echo from wingtip to tail, triggering faults the human brain struggles to parse in seconds. Engineers point out that older jets, full of wet hydraulics and steel cables, cannot be hacked so cleanly. They fail loudly, not silently. Still, the industry chose smarts over brute force because efficiency pays for itself. The Dreamliner remains statistically safe. Tens of millions of hours, thousands of flights daily. But after June 2025, every mention of the model carries a quiet asterisk. Robust, provided code integrity never slips. Maintenance window, April's ghost. All arrows soon pointed to one event. The April 2025 B-check performed in an Ahmedabad hangar.
A month after the tragic Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad.
Logbooks list nothing exotic. Oil analysis, avionics software, harmonization, vibration shakedown, and a small engine control update downloaded from Boeing's secure mirror. The technician in charge, with 10 years on Dreamliners and no disciplinary history, followed the digital checklist. Plug ruggedized laptop into the aircraft data port. Upload patch. Wait for green bar. Forensics later seized that laptop. Its drive showed no malware. The server hash, however, did not match Boeing's mainline repository in Seattle. Somewhere between the master image and the mirror, bytes shifted so subtly that nightly scans flagged only a checksum anomaly minor enough to pass. Investigators still debate whether the mirror was hacked or an insider swapped binaries. Either way, once the patch passed validation, it carried Boeing's signature keys and looked legitimate to every system downstream. Crew performing daily checks in May never noticed. Software versions matched official release numbers. In effect, Flight 171 launched with a Trojan horse sleeping in plain sight. The case exposed a gaping hole. Global supply chains trust mirrored servers spread worldwide to save bandwidth. Compromise a mirror, and you slip past fortress-level firewalls guarding the core. Boeing has since rebuilt its patch distribution model, but the April ghost remains lesson number 1. Hidden command, visible consequences. The rogue subroutine carried a 3-line recipe: throttle cap, generator shutdown, then hydraulic pump inhibition. Each line alone would degrade performance. Together, they crippled it. Line 1 froze the fuel metering valve at a flow suited to ground idle testing. Line 2 forced the electric generators offline, believing they were overloading, thus triggering rat deployment. Line 3 told electric hydraulic pumps to stand by, assuming ground equipment was supplying pressure. All conditions mimicked a maintenance scenario, except the jet was airborne. Coders embedded a start condition requiring both airspeed above 130 knots and radio altitude below 1,000 feet, precisely takeoff bleed air time. Why such sophistication? Analysts propose 3 motives. 1. A targeted assassination ensuring no chance of diversion. 2. A proof-of-concept cyber weapon demo aimed at rattling governments. Or 3. An ideological act meant to expose civil aviation vulnerabilities without explicit claim. No matter the motive, the outcome was surgical. Engines spun, pilots lived just long enough to recognize sabotage, and data logs captured every byte for later study. Ironically, the saboteur's precision also ensured detection. Ham-fisted hacks often disappear amid crash chaos, but this one left a signature as neat as an artist's monogram. Theories, whispers, and parallels. Aviation forums buzzed. Some users linked Flight 171 to a 2022 Middle East cargo jet incident where thrust dipped mysteriously yet recovered in time. Telemetry comparisons show uncanny similarity, a throttling curve that rose fast, plateaued low, then self-canceled. Investigators reopened that file and found a stub of code matching part of Flight 171's routine, minus the generator kill lines. Was that incident a rehearsal? Meanwhile, intelligence circles floated darker ideas. A high-value data scientist under quiet protection had boarded Flight 171. Perhaps the crash silenced him. Others argued a geopolitical rival sought to dent India's aviation credibility. Official channels acknowledged none of these rumors. Instead, they called for restraint, citing ongoing investigations involving multinational stakeholders. Yet silence fed speculation. Hacktivist groups published redacted snippets leaked from early reports, showing hash discrepancies and RATI triggers. Boeing threatened legal action. Files still spread. By late July, conspiracy podcasts treated Flight 171 as proof of an unseen cyber war. Within the industry, a quieter consensus formed. Whatever the motive, the method was real, and copycats could reverse engineer it now that details were partly public. Training departments began drafting uncommanded throttle limitation drills before any regulator issued orders, a sign professionals no longer trusted off-the-shelf security. Public silence, private panic. Official briefings grew terse. The Indian Civil Aviation Ministry released a 2-page interim note.
Regarding the report, this is a preliminary report right now, and from the ministry we are analyzing the report. But
sequence of anomalous system behaviors under analysis. Families of victims felt stonewalled. Lawyers filed right-to-information requests that yielded heavily blacked-out pages. Behind that wall, airlines demanded answers during off-record conference calls. Insurers, fearing precedent, asked how to price cyber risk in airframes. Boeing senior managers convened overnight code audit sprints. One insider described conference rooms wallpapered with flowcharts. Meanwhile, regulators debated ballistic steps, require physical write-protect switches on engine control firmware, mandate separate checksum servers. Each fix had cost and certification hurdles. Engineers raced while PR teams downplayed. A single sentence from a leaked FAA memo captured the mood. If the public grasps the ease of supply chain firmware poisoning, we risk grounding the world fleet indefinitely. Thus began a tightrope act. Correct the flaw quietly, reassure passengers loudly, never openly admit sabotage until proof became undeniable. The paradox sowed distrust. Memorial vigils live-streamed appeals for transparency. Social hashtags, Tell Us Why, and 171 Truth trended in India and the UK. Underneath, aviation insiders swapped checksums and debug screenshots in encrypted chats, piecing together a story officials wouldn't state. Panic had found a new vector, code you cannot see but cannot stop thinking about. Rat, the tiny turbine that screamed. To outsiders, the Ram Air turbine looks like a child's toy propeller. yet its presence in flight photos often signals extreme trouble. Mounted flush under the fuselage, the Rat flips out only when both main AC buses drop below threshold, restoring just enough electricity for flight controls and crucial avionics. On Flight 171, it appeared 18 seconds after liftoff, far earlier than any simulator script designers had ever contemplated. That timing provided investigators a Rosetta Stone, match Rat deployment to thrust readings, then trace backwards to what killed generators. In simulator reruns, engineers purposely killed fuel flow but kept electrics alive. Rat stayed stowed. They then tripped generators with full thrust. Rat came out, but engines kept pulling, allowing climb. Only the hybrid failure, throttle choke plus generator trip, reproduced both Rat sighting and altitude stall. Thus, the tiny turbine became the loudest witness, screaming that Flight 171 didn't suffer random component loss. It suffered an orchestrated power strangulation designed to drag it from the sky before pilots could circle back. Safety lectures now show big slides of that miniature propeller with red arrows. See this? It means someone, or something, has already pushed every other defense past braking. Simulator proof and industry wake. Within Boeing's high-fidelity 787 SimLab, test pilots loaded the rogue routine into mission computers. The scenario played out with chilling repeatability. At 50 feet, thrust rolled back. At 120 knots, generators dumped. At 18 seconds, Rat sprouted. Crews attempted every memory item, toga buttons, manual fuel override, APU start, but nothing restored thrust above idle. Glide path deteriorated, stick shaker rattled, ground impact hit at almost the identical hostile coordinates. After 5 runs, the lab chief stopped testing. There's no recovery. He sent data packages to regulators. Airlines that saw the footage demanded immediate patch validation. Overnight, Dreamliners awaiting departure in Sydney, Toronto, and Frankfurt underwent emergency software scans. Checksum mismatches grounded 3 hulls briefly. Competing manufacturers, alarmed, cross-checked their own electronic control units, even though no Airbus used Boeing code. The event became aerospace's version of a zero-day exploit gone global. SimLabs wrote new lesson plans: throttle loss after liftoff, Rat out, forced straight-ahead crash landing into unpopulated terrain. Such drills feel surreal, like training airline captains to ditch in backyards, yet businesses insisted they were now essential. The cost of denial had been spelled in flames on a college hostel wall. Supply chain threat exposed. The dream of cloud-synchronized logistics collided with reality. Investigators traced Boeing's mirrored update server to a third-party data center in Southeast Asia, chosen years earlier for latency perks. Forensic teams found signs of credential compromise on March 27, 2025, possible phishing that nabbed admin tokens. Inside, attackers replaced one update bundle among thousands, altering only 56 kilobytes. Because the mirror was downstream of Boeing's primary code-signing gateway, its files still bore valid signatures. Essentially, the key to the castle walked in through a side door nobody watched. Cybersecurity experts call this a supply chain interdiction. Stuxnet did it to centrifuges. SolarWinds did it to corporate networks. Now aviation had its cautionary tale. The fix demanded more than stronger passwords. Manufacturers implanted immutable hardware roots of trust so that even signed packages get a second fingerprint on arrival. Airlines upgraded gate routers to whitelist only images whose hashes matched a top-level ledger stored on a blockchain-like ledger. All that tech investment stemmed from 56 kilobytes that killed 241 people. As one CIO bleakly noted, software is eating the world. Flight 171 shows it can spit out the bones. Questions still dangling. Even with technical chains mapped, motive remains opaque. Intelligence briefings delivered to select parliaments list 4 possibilities. 1. A nation-state probing defenses. 2. A a criminal group testing ransomware leverage. 3. An insider bent on ideological revenge. 4. A misguided white hat demonstration gone lethal. No suspect has been charged, no manifesto surfaced. The fact that nobody claimed credit suggests either ultra-professional OPSEC or an unintentional kill switch tripped too soon. Relatives ask simpler questions. Why my child? Why no admission of fault? Lawsuits argue that Boeing and regulators should have predicted mirror server hacks. Defense teams counter, patch pipelines passed all standards known in 2025. Courts will weigh degrees of foreseeability, but verdicts cannot restore lives. Meanwhile, watchdog journalists fear a quiet precedent. If cyber sabotage remains unattributed, future attacks may slide into the same fog, written off as anomalous behavior. Flight 171's black boxes talk. People in power choose how loudly to listen. Industry counterstrike. By early 2026, the aviation world rolled out a barrage of reforms. ECAS now contains an in-flight integrity monitor, a chip that hashes running code every 5 seconds. A mismatch triggers automatic OCPU reboot and locks the throttle at full climb, the opposite of 171's choke. Airlines added dual pilot thumbprint authorization before any ground laptop can upload firmware. Regulators mandated quarterly red team penetration audits, where ethical hackers attempt to breach maintenance networks. Training syllabi worldwide include a half-day module on digital threat response. Cadets practice flying without auto throttles, without FD symbology, with RAT out from 400 feet. Hardware changes too. Next-generation Dreamliners sport mechanical backup levers that bypass engines' digital front ends, a nod to vintage jets. Some call it a step backward, others call it humility. Insurance actuaries revised risk models, adding cyber riders that nudge premiums unless airlines prove compliance. The speed of these countermeasures is rare in aerospace, where certification cycles span years. Flight 171 compressed them into months, driven by cold arithmetic.
Air India Flight 171 crashed just after takeoff on June 12th in the western city of Ahmedabad. 241 people on board died and at least 19 people on the ground as well.
One breach grounded 6 jets in June. A second breach might ground 600. The human cost, never abstract. Statistics blur until you picture faces. A newly married couple on honeymoon, a grandmother visiting grandkids in Brighton, 10 engineering students heading to internships, 3 infants who never felt level flight. At Ahmedabad Airport, a glass wall now holds 241 silhouettes etched with names, ages, hometowns. Visitors touch the outlines, tracing strangers' stories. On anniversaries, families gather under a banyan tree planted from the hostel's courtyard soil. They pour petals into a reflecting pool. The lone survivor attends in a wheelchair, still rehabilitating from nerve damage. He speaks softly at each vigil. We flew trusting machines built by people who cared. We died because someone, somewhere, forgot or chose to care less. His words sting engineers who argue they do care, yet the outcome contradicts intent. Monetary settlements help pay mortgages, but cannot refill empty chairs at family dinners. Aviation boards wrestle with budget lines, yet relatives measure cost in birthday candles never lit. Each safety bulletin now opens with a slide bearing the victims' names, a practice borrowed from medical ethics meant to keep human stakes in sight. Looking forward, a charged sky. Will skies grow safer? History suggests yes. Every tragedy births layers of protection, yet Flight 171 carves a new warning on that upward arc. As aircraft grow more autonomous, threats migrate from engines and weather to silicon and Wi-Fi. Future turbofans may run flawlessly while hidden routines target navigation databases, weather uplinks, or passenger Wi-Fi routers. The fix requires constant vigilance, endless patches, and a culture that treats invisible code with the same respect as rivets. Passengers, too, will change. Many already ask airlines if their planes run the latest firmware, much like phone users demanding OS updates. Regulators draft cyber airworthiness directives in plain language so crew chiefs can brief cabin staff. Will that be enough? Perhaps. But the better question echoes the opening hook. Would you step aboard a jet if you knew a single corrupted file could overrule the captain? The only acceptable answer is yes, because industry, regulators, and the flying public insist on transparency and act quickly when holes appear. Flight 171's fireball over Ahmedabad was not merely an accident. It was an alarm clock for global aviation. We have awakened. Now we must stay awake. In the wreckage of Flight 171, we didn't just lose lives, we lost trust in the systems meant to protect us. For the families left behind, silence has been the loudest response. This wasn't just an accident. It was a warning written in code, buried in circuits, and ignored until it was too late. As the world flies forward on digital wings, one question remains: who's really in control? And until that answer comes, every takeoff carries an unspoken fear.